for such a time as this is the key to this. In that song, now Misha Hoyt is not Esther, obviously, but she's playing Esther in the song. And the things that are very striking is how could a girl like me do anything? You know, we think, how could somebody like me do anything? Why would God use any of us to do anything? We're not that bright. We're not that anything you want to say. But like he said to Moses, I didn't pick Abraham because he was the most awesome man. He was the most righteous man. He was the richest man, the most handsome man, the most intelligent man. I picked Abraham because I wanted to pick him. It's a sovereign choice. He picks us to do something, and we're here for such a time as this. And if you don't know why you're here, and if you don't think that's true, you're missing out. And like that song says, you have to stand. You see what's going on in the world around us. We have to stand. So for such a time as this. So, of course, this is the book of Esther. And this takes place in Persia, which was Babylon, and the Persian Empire in Daniel's time conquered the Babylonian Empire and had a series of kings. The Persian Empire was huge. It went from Africa across the Middle East all the way to India, went north. They even fought with the Greeks. Remember I forgot what the wars were called, but the Persians and the Greeks were always fighting. I mean, that's how far they could extend their influence. So it's all about Queen Esther. And we're going to go through a summary of the book really fast. I promise it won't be very long. And we won't read the whole book. But Purim, which was the other night, it was actually sundown on March 2nd. It's called Purim because Pur was the Persian word for a dice, a die, a lot. So they cast lots to decide when they were going to kill the Jews. So the holiday became known as Purim or Purim. And like every Jewish holiday, it's summarized by, they tried to kill us, it didn't work, let's eat. And it's a time of great celebration. So we're going to kind of go through this. This is in Persia. The people are going back to the land. You remember King Cyrus? The Thursday morning group knows this all too well. King Cyrus gives them permission to go back to the land and rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. He says that like 58 times. We're going to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. So Ezra gets everything ready. He's a scribe. He's kept genealogies. He's kept scriptures. He's kept commentaries all the time. They've been there for 70 years at this point. Most people were born and raised there. The vast majority had never been to the land unless they were like, little kids when they left. And we're not going to go through all that, but Zerubbabel and the first contingent goes over and they rebuild the temple against enemies and resistance. Then Ezra comes and brings the vessels of the temple and brings gold and silver and gets the priesthood going again, resistance. But some people were left behind. There were quite a few Jews that either hadn't gone there yet or decided not to leave. They had lived there for a long time. They didn't know any different. It would be like, well, I'm a child of immigrants, but it would be like if you've been in this country like, I don't know, 3 or 4 generations, and your great-grandparents came from Scotland, you probably wouldn't say, I think we'll just all go back to Scotland. I'd feel really comfortable about that. They had never been to Israel. They felt more comfortable where they were. Plus, a lot of them had delis that they opened up and various businesses. And the pastrami and corned beef weren't as good as in the Holy Land, but they had to make do. This is a tough crowd. Whew. So this is where the story takes place. In summary, King Ahasuerus, who is a real historical figure, he's mentioned in the book of Nehemiah, and then one of his successors is also named Ahasuerus. Some people say he's Xerxes or Artaxerxes. Some people say he's somebody different. It doesn't matter. That question will not be on the final exam for the Thursday morning group. No. So it's the Persian Empire. The people have been there. And if you remember, the last Babylonian king took all the holy vessels of the temple and partied with them. So if you read the book of Daniel, they drank wine out of them, and a finger appeared and started writing on the wall. Daniel's the only one who could interpret it. So then the Persians came in. The Persians, the Medo-Persians, had one very unusual law. The king, once he made a decree, could not undo the decree. So if the king said, I proclaim this, if he changed his mind the following day, he couldn't change it. That was it. He didn't care how many congressional committees he had to go to or what. He couldn't change his proclamation. And of course, each of the kings had multiple wives. There was one woman who was recognized as the queen, but there were scores of other wives who had, I don't know what you'd call it. They had rights as part of the royal family, but they weren't ruling in any way. So the main queen, Queen Vashti, was banished by Ahasuerus because I'm not going to read the whole book, but at the beginning of the book, you see the king is having a party for all his noblemen. And of course, it would be all men. And so they were drunk and they were eating. And the king asks for Queen Vashti to come in and do a dance. And in the Hebrew, it means she's going to dance without clothes on. And she refused to do it. And so the king, you don't refuse the king. So the king says, you know, you've been my queen, love you and everything, but you're out of here if you don't do what I say. So they began to search for a new queen. And the king sent out his people to all provinces in the empire to find beautiful women and bring them to her, bring them to him. Tough job being king. So these people go out and they pick up Esther. Now, Esther's name is Hadassah in Hebrew, but she's always known as Esther, which means it's the Persian word for star. Just like, in the book of Daniel, that some people are known by their Hebrew names, some people are known by their Babylonian names. You have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but you have Daniel. Here you've got Hadassah, who becomes Esther. So she goes through this whole big process. Her parents had died when she was little. She was raised by Mordecai, who some translations say was her uncle, some say was her cousin, but she was quite a bit older. He was quite a bit older, and he raised her. And she gets picked to come. So the king is reviewing all these women, and he likes Esther. Esther's one of the very few women. The other one I can think of is Rachel, but I'm pretty sure there's one or two others. The only women who are described in the Bible as being beautiful and of having a beautiful form. So when the Bible says that, you have to assume she's this really beautiful woman. So the king says, I'll take her. So she has to go through a 12-month preparation, learning the things and getting perfumed and all this stuff. So the king takes a liking to her and she becomes the actual queen, like Vashti was. So she's in this amazing position. Mordecai indicates to her, don't tell anybody that you're Jewish. That's going to blow everything. After all, the Persians just got rid of us, but there's still some of us here, but let's not make a big deal about it because we don't want any more trouble. So don't say anything. Hint, Esther represents the church. So she gets into the court, and Haman, yeah, now we go. Here we go. Every time you mention Haman's name, you have to make a disgusting noise, or you have to have a noisemaker. But since we're not having a play, it's okay. So Haman is the king's chief advisor, the prime minister, or whatever they called it. And he's an Agagite. Woo, which means he's an Amalekite. Now, if you remember, when the people left Egypt, the Amalekites attacked them from the rear, and they killed stragglers. And Moses got up on the hill. Remember, Aaron and Hur held his arms up, and they prevailed. And God said, I'm going to wipe out Amalek from the world. Every memory of him, I'm going to wipe out. We get to 1 Samuel. He tells King Saul, you have to go fight the Amalekites. You have to kill every man, every woman, every child, and every livestock, every animal that's theirs. So Saul goes there, doesn't mind killing the men, but he keeps some of the women and he keeps the animals. So the prophet Samuel comes over and he says, why do I hear the bleating of sheep? Samuel could hear the sheep. He said, so you didn't kill them. And Saul makes a lame excuse. Oh, they were really nice sheep, so we're going to take them to, sacrifice them at the sanctuary. And Samuel says, and what's he doing here? And King Agag was there. So Samuel picks up a sword and kills him personally. It says he hacked up the king. There's people out there who don't know scripture that think, well, everything in the Bible is just about being nice. Well, here's the great prophet Samuel hacks this guy to death with a sword. Woo. It's pretty serious business. So Haman is an Agagite. There's people who believe that Hitler had to have some lineage back to Amalek. And maybe other people who tried to kill Jews. But anyway, because first the people in the wilderness and then Saul didn't completely kill him. But anyway, so he parades around an image and tells everybody they have to bow. Mordecai won't bow. So Haman is furious. And he finds out that Mordecai's a Jew. So he's mad at this one guy, and he determines that all the Jews in Persia have to be killed, and decides they should all be killed on the same day. That'll make an impression among the people. He figures it'll increase his popularity. They'll have all the film on CNN and Fox, and his name will go up in the polls. So all the Jews will be killed. So they cast lots to find out what day this was going to happen, or the holiday, not a feast day, of course. The holiday gets its name, Purim or Purim. And this occurred in the month of Adar, which is now. And the solar calendar, it's either in February or early March. So we just had it the other day. So he goes to the king and says, these Jews, they're different than we are. They don't respect our laws. They don't worship our gods. They got weird ideas. They don't eat what we eat. I mean, who do they think they are? Now, remember, in Babylon, the Jews had been treated pretty well. They all got nice government jobs. Daniel had a nice government job. He retired on a good pension with a lot of benefits. And it's a tough audience. So they put the guys in the fire. But other than that, they were treated pretty well. So the king gets infuriated by this, tells Haman, write it down and I'll sign it. Yeah. So he writes He writes the proclamation and seals it with his ring. So the word gets around the city, they're going to kill all the Jews. The people in the city are all confused because the Jews have been there for by this time, probably 80 years. You know that the Jews in Germany considered themselves German. They were very loyal to Germany. They had lived there a long time. They prospered there. They considered themselves German as well as Jews. So many Jews have Germanic sounding names that come from that place. So everybody finds out. The Jews go into grief and mourning. They decide they have to pray and repent. So they put on sackcloth, they put ashes on, because they're going to be killed. And the other thing they know is the king can't change his mind. Esther doesn't get what's going on. Esther forgot that she was Jewish. I mean, she didn't forget, but she didn't think about it. So Mordecai goes and tells her, hey, things are bad out there. Everybody's got sackcloth and ashes. The king's going to have all of us killed. And if they're going to kill us, wait till they find out the queen is a Jew. The queen's going to be next, because remember, the king sent Vashti, Queen Vashti, out, didn't think anything of it. You think he's not going to get rid of you? She doesn't get it. She thinks that Mordecai needs new clothes. So he shows her the decree and says, you must intercede for us. You're the only one that can approach the king. Now, the other thing about the king, she's his main wife. He's got 100 other wives. Nobody just goes into the king's room. You have to be sent by the king. And if you walked into his throne room and he pointed his thingamabobber at you, they came and took you out and killed you. Whether you were his wife or the janitor or whoever you were, no one approached the king. So nobody just went walking in there. So Mordecai says, you have to intercede with the king. Esther's afraid. She goes, I can't go there without being called. She said, I've been away from the king for a while. Because, he had all these other women. So Mordecai says, you know what? You're not going to escape this. You haven't told anybody you're a Jew. Nobody knows that you're a Jew. But you won't escape it. Isn't it funny that Jews and Christians are usually persecuted kind of together? You won't escape. Chapter 4:13. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. God's not going to let the Jews perish. So if you don't help, he'll find somebody else who's going to help. Now, why do we know they're not going to perish? Well, for one thing, Messiah hasn't come yet. Messiah is the son of David, right? He has a Jewish mother. He has Jewish relatives. He traces his lineage all the way back to David and Judah and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham. So you can't wipe out all the Jews, because then Messiah couldn't come. Plus, they were the chosen people who God had revealed himself to. And there was still more revelation to come at this point. So the Jews are not going to perish. But he says, your father's house is going to perish, but if you don't do this, somebody else will. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? We are going through the world facing things. The churches are surrendering by the hundreds. Oh, yes. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to say anything. Oh, because after all, we want to be like the world. We want to be just like all y'all are. Well, maybe we're here for such a time as this. Maybe we're here to say, what you're doing is wrong. Oh, wait, who are you to judge? Who are you to judge? That guy who won the primary in Texas, boy, Look him up sometime. He wants to send, well, I'm not going to talk about politics, but he wants to send J.D. Vance a Bible. And I thought to myself, he ought to read it first. Because he says there's 6 genders, and the Bible doesn't talk about marriage. Bible doesn't talk about marriage. Bible doesn't talk about abortion, doesn't talk about killing children. All the Bible talks about is, being good to everyone. He goes, I know Hindus and Buddhists that are much better, are much more Christ-like than Christians are. So what do we say? So what is the church? He's in a seminary. He's in a Presbyterian seminary. Can you imagine John Calvin hearing this? But anyway, and nobody in the church says, excuse me, sir, Mr. Senator, you're talking nonsense. Let me see what seminary books you're reading. But no, nobody says anything. The president of the United States, not this president, the former president, goes, oh, I'm so Catholic. He's got a prayer book and a rosary in his hand talking about how Catholic he is. And on Easter Sunday, he proclaims Trans Visibility Day. Not one single person in the church anywhere said anything. Not one. Not one. This is what we are. Maybe we're here for such a time as this. If you see what's happening in the Anglican Church and the Methodist Church, they've gone totally off the rails. They're so woke that they don't even know what else they can do to be more woke. So maybe you're here for such a time as this. So God sets the situation through his providence. We don't always know what's happening. She didn't know this was going to happen. King Ahasuerus doesn't know this is going to happen. Mordecai didn't know this was going to happen. Haman didn't know this was going to happen. We don't always know what's going to happen, but there's always a plan. If Esther doesn't do it, somebody else will. If part of God's plan is that Bob over there is going to be part of it, and Bob doesn't get the message, or he says, no, I don't want to do anything like that. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. I got to go to work. I got to go whatever. God doesn't say, oh, what am I going to do now? I had all my hopes pinned on Bob. He says, okay, Bob doesn't want to do it, so I got Ralph over there. He'll do it, right? He's not going to say the plan's abandoned. So someone else will do it. But the people are not going to be destroyed. Promises to the patriarchs, the covenant, Messiah had to come, so forth and so forth. In fact, Israel will be destroyed, God says, if we can control how the sun and the moon move, if we can control how the ocean waves move, if we can measure the extent of the universe and the foundation of the earth, then Israel won't exist anymore. Which means never. Jeremiah 31, 34 and following. But since nobody knows anything about the Bible anymore, nobody knows that stuff. Because we have to go to church and have high five Jesus in the smoke machine, and nobody knows anything. So what's Esther's response? Well, first, she doesn't know what's going on. She says, wait a minute, Uncle Mordecai, Cousin Mordecai, whatever he is. I know I used to live with you, but now I live in the palace. I'm here with the king. So this seems like it's your problem, not my problem. Remember, Esther's the church. This sounds like it's your problem. Do you know that every single church in Nazi Germany sided with the Nazis? Every single church. Whether it was Lutheran, Catholic, whatever it was, other than Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I'm sure there were others, nobody stood up and said, this is immoral what you're doing. Well, if you say that again, we're going to kill you. Well, this is immoral what you're doing. We're going to kill you. Okay, you can kill me, but this is immoral what you're doing. I know they're killing Jews over there, but, what can we do? I got to go to work. I got my church over here. I got all this nice stuff. I can't say anything. Those stormtroopers will come barreling through the door. Because nobody has courage anymore. Everybody takes the path of least resistance. Oh, I don't want to get in any trouble. Somebody blasphemes the name of God at work. They say, oh, well, that's his opinion. He can believe what he wants. So what's Esther's response? I'm going to pray and fast about this. And then she decides, even if I have to do this, even if I perish. I have to do this, even if I perish. I don't know how many leaders in Nazi Germany stood up. I just used Bonhoeffer as an example. We're going to arrest you. We're going to kill you. Well, I stand up for this. Okay, you're under arrest. Come with us. You want to recant that, or we're going to kill you? Well, okay. And, as he's walking, they hung him like the war was almost over. This is how crazy it was. War was almost over, and they hung him anyway. I mean, a couple of weeks later, they were out of power. But, as he was walking toward the rope, he's talking to the guards, going, you know what? You're going to murder me. This is against the law of God. This is a horrible sin that you're doing. Maybe you should think about what you're doing. They hung him. So I'm going to do this. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Providence sets this up. So that night, the king can't sleep, and he starts looking through historical records and realizes that Mordecai should be honored because at the beginning of the book, he saves the king's life. He finds out about a plot. So he tells Haman he has to honor Mordecai. Haman's already building the gallows to hang Mordecai on. The Persians of today built missiles, drones, almost nukes, all kind of stuff to kill the Jews with them. And Americans, but to kill the Jews with them. So Haman has to honor the guy. So he parades him around the city. So Esther goes and says to the king, you have to save my people. And the king finally realizes she's a Jew. He didn't know. So Haman gets so angry that he has Haman hung on the same gallows that he built to hang Mordecai. And he has Mordecai dressed up in royal clothes. That's his thing. And then since he can't change the law, he makes another proclamation that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves against his own army. Yes, the day before. So they fight off, he says, fight off my own army. That's how bad it was that they couldn't change the law. So he makes Mordecai a governor. Mordecai's given Haman's property, and Haman's 10 sons are killed all the same day. The dude has 10 sons, and they hung them all. So what does this all mean? Why is this book in the Bible? What are some things we can learn from it? Well, we already learned a big lesson for such a time as this. There's a plan going on. We're part of a plan. Not me. I'm not part of a plan. Well, maybe you're supposed to be part of a plan. I never hear God talking to me. Well, let's see. The TV's blaring. You got kids running around the house. You got music playing in the other room. You got work pressure where you say, you know what, tonight I got to sit at the table and I got to go through all these papers and I got to get my computer out. How can he possibly get your attention? Oh, I say a prayer once in a while. I do the 57-minute thing on Sunday. I don't hear anything. So why is it in the Bible? This is kind of like the Song of Songs, if you ever studied the Song of Songs. Our friend's home group is trying to do it on the Roots of Foundation site, but it's very complicated. But some of it even sounds racy, kind of pornographic, really, because it's about a man and a woman. And it got put into the canon by the councils of rabbis. And for a couple hundred years, rabbis were saying, why is this book in the canon of Scripture? I mean, this is weird. This is a letter that Solomon wrote to one of his wives. And Solomon was a pretty racy guy, too. He only had 1,000 women. I don't know how he kept track of them all, but I think they had numbers. But anyway. And then, I don't know who it was, but a head teacher, probably a Nicodemus type, wrote a study. It said the book represents God being married to Israel. And this is why God calls Israel a harlot, a prostitute, why she's unfaithful to me. He uses all the words about Israel that have to do with things going wrong in a marriage. We know that the church is the bride of Christ. And so when you read the Song of Songs and think about it in Christian terms, you get it right away. So it's an amazing book. Maybe we should do that on a Thursday morning. But anyway, so what can we learn from it? We're part of a plan. Now here's a possible explanation. Esther represents the church. The church knew at the beginning she was Jewish, but then, things started going nice for the Gentile church. The emperor came on board and all kind of stuff started going, and they started having their own traditions and their own stuff. And, many of the people were pretty anti-Semitic and say, we don't need any of that Jewish stuff. When it gets to the Reformation, it's even worse because Luther is a raving anti-Semite. He says, the only way I'm going to baptize a Jew is if I throw him off the bridge into the river. I mean, it was really ugly stuff. Constantine wrote diatribes against Jews, how they had to be abolished, how all their feast days had to be abolished. It's all ugly stuff, but, racism and prejudice have been around since Adam and Eve, I don't know, or at least after they had a couple of generations of kids. So Esther kind of represents the church. You forgot that she's Jewish. She's living in a nice place. She thinks that she's the only one who has access to the king, which is true in the sense that Jesus is the only way to the Father. But she's got a life, but she doesn't want to think about her background. I mean, if you go to a church that's liturgical, some of these prayers we say at the beginning are right in there. But that's another story. Forgot that she's Jewish. Didn't tell anyone. Doesn't want to tell anyone that she's Jewish. When's Good Friday and Easter / Resurrection Day supposed to be? Passover time. That's how it makes sense. That's how the plan of salvation crystallizes. But what do? Oh, no, we can't do that. So we're going to make it the first Sunday after the first full moon, after, Why? Didn't tell anyone. So that was her background, the church's background. But then there were other influences, other experiences. The church got more and more important as time went on. The Eastern Church in the East controlled everything. The Western Church controlled everything. They got more and more power. The popes used to have armies. Woo. If you messed with the Pope, his army would come. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's true. In the East, they were horribly anti-Semitic. Priests would encourage people to go beat up the Jews. Oh, by the way, when we're done with the liturgy, let's go out and beat up some Jews. Anybody want to come along? I mean, that's what happened. So Mordecai, of course, represents Judaism, appealing to the church to help. We have a common heritage. We've seen this unfold in our time. Look at the TV commercials. Fellowship of Christian and Jews. I don't remember what all those other places are called. But it's like a Christian should be helping Israel. Come and help us. Appealing to the church from our common roots, from our common scripture, from Judeo-Christian morality, to support Israel, to pray and fast for them, like Esther did, to prevent persecution, to work for common causes, and to stand for the true God. Haman, he's demonic. He represents humanism, pride, the perfect carnal man. I want to be in control of this. Anybody who opposes me, I want to kill him. He's an antichrist figure. The king loosely represents God. The church is Esther, kind of afraid of him, but knows that she's in there with him, and has been there for a while. And the king is always asking for a bride, always asking for his bride, just like Song of Songs, just like the church is the bride of Christ. There's always a bridal paradigm in the scripture. No one can approach him unless he says. Vashti represents a false church, doesn't respond to the king. The king banishes her. Now, that's very loose because he wanted her to come and dance without clothes on. She wouldn't do it. So you have to respect her for that. So Esther wants what the king wants, not what she wants. Seeks his kingdom. She wants to please him. She had fallen away, but then she came back. So the church wants what the king wants, and seeking the kingdom wants to please the king. Haman accuses the people before the king. Get rid of these people, they're different. Just yesterday, I'm not going to mention names, but a very famous politician said, Christians are the main people that are standing in the way of our progress. We're never going to make any progress with these Christians around. You've already seen the anti-Semitism. Whoever thought on college campuses you'd have anti-Semitism? Man, I never thought I would see such a thing. Now it's not just starting, it's been going for a while. These Christians are in our way. And now that they've got all the churches shut up, none of them will say a word, now they can start going after individuals. Say, what did you say? What did you say? What do you mean this is wrong, what I'm doing? Who are you to say? So Mordecai says, appeal to the king and intercede for us, or they're going to come for you next. Church doesn't want to help the Jews. Well, eventually they're going to come for you. We have a common background, common roots. And then Haman, the Antichrist, has to honor Mordecai, and he hates Mordecai. Mordecai won't bow to this because it's carnal. And he says the truth is going to be known. This is all just, So she says, somebody wants me dead and my people dead, and it's Haman. And that's when he's hung. Because Satan is an enemy of Christians and Jews, right? Satan doesn't care if you're a Hindu. No threat, right? Does Satan care if you're a Buddhist? Not a bit. I heard somebody do a talk about Eastern mysticism and yoga and stuff. And, people were calling in saying, oh, but I do it because it relaxes me, or I do it because, and this woman who was giving the talk said, the demons don't care why you're doing it. They're just happy that you're doing it, because then they can start influencing you. Ouija boards. So Purim, you read the scrolls, you learn the lesson, and the people in the church will be saved. Romans 11 says all Israel will be saved. We're getting close. We're getting close. I hope it's tomorrow, but we're getting close. So now Israel is fighting Persia. Isn't that interesting? All the weapons that Iran built to kill Jews are now being destroyed by Jews and Americans, but